Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you another League of Legends related video. In this video, we're going to be going over you, well, jungle. So the question here is, do you want to be a jungler? If so, why exactly do you want to be that? We're going to be going over a lot of the basic stuff. This is a kind of beginner's guide to the basics of jungle. We will be talking about the fact that jungle is very complex and going over kind of the key notes of what jungle is. Now, if you want to continue to pursue it after this, that is going to be needing more specific guides than what I will be offering in this. This is kind of a generalized thing, and it is directed more at newer people who are interested in the role. So to get started, guys, let's move on down here, maybe, if my command actually works. There we go. What should I know to jungle? So some of the first things you need to understand about jungle is that jungle requires a lot of game knowledge and decision making. It is probably the largest decision making role in the game. That's why a lot of people feel like a jungle diff will be costing them the game. You have to make a number of decisions every single game. Do I gank top, mid, bot? Why would I gank top, mid, or bot? Should I be fighting for the first scuttle crab? Should I try to avoid them and go for the other scuttle crab? Should I be clearing top to bottom? Should I clear bottom to top? Do I need to just keep farming? Should I invade? Should I try to fight? There's so many decisions that jungle makes, more so than other lanes. To put it in perspective, a laner generally has to decide, do I go for the CS? Do I go for it? Do I attack somebody? Do I sit back and kind of just farm up? Their decisions are going to be oriented around their lane. You, the jungler, have to make decisions that can impact any part of the map. That is a large amount of decision making because you have 3 lanes you actively can affect, you have 2 objectives you can actively go for, and you have 6 of your own camps and 6 enemy camps you could potentially go for, and then 2 scuttles in the river. That is so many different avenues that you have to be paying attention to, and on top of that, you have to be able to know generally where the enemy jungler is, so that if they attempt something, you are ready for it. So all in all, you have to know that this is not necessarily going to be what we call a micro role. When you're talking about micro mechanics versus macro mechanics are going to be your outplays, your people that are going around using flashy abilities, using all their different like I said, different abilities and auto attacks and stuff, and you were trying to kill people and fight people constantly. Jungle has some elements of micro to it, but your macro will ultimately decide what you are doing. Macro play is that bigger picture that I'm talking about, that ability to look at the map and kind of decide what the best thing for you and your team will be. So if you don't have great decision making, that's kind of hard to determine. I mean, this isn't a great role for you, but if it doesn't sound fun that you have to manage so many different elements, this might not be a role you want to look at. But let's say it is. Then you go into the stylistic differences between junglers. You have supportive junglers, kind of like Ivern and Morgana. You have tank junglers like Zac, Nautilus, Gragas, though Gragas can also be kind of a damage jungler. You have the early junglers like Elise, Lee Sin, Rek'Sai. You have late game junglers like Karthus. There's so many different avenues of an approach that the jungle can have. You can be a power farmer or a heavy ganker. You can be a middle ground jungler as well. There's so many different styles, and you have to identify which style you generally like. Now note, this video is not going to the extreme in depth on any of these topics. This is just kind of getting you thinking about the role. This specific part here is to get you thinking about, is there something that appeals to me? Maybe I can identify my style. So when you're looking at it, do you like to farm or do you like to gank? Do you like to fight? Do you like to skirmish, or do you like team fights? Difference there is skirmish is generally just small groups of people fighting, and it could be chaotic as heck. Team fights is organizing, grouping up, and figuring out how as a team you're going to play for an objective, or try to generally play for an objective, though some team fights can break out over nothing. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, I do want to jungle. I do know that I want to get better at learning all this knowledge, in which then you need to start looking into some more in-depth guides, because the jungle itself, there's nothing really super simple about the jungle. I mean, we'll be talking about it as if there's simplified facts for it, but to be honest, to begin, Lord, tongue-tied, to begin getting good at the role, you have to actively take a lot more time to learn it. This is not nearly as much of, here's some of the simple things that you can kind of cheat outside of pathing potentially, but even then, your pathing changes depending on your champion. And when I say pathing, this is going from camp to camp to be able to farm these different monster camps. If you don't know what farming is, it's killing monster camps to get gold. I don't know how simple I need to go down with these, but I'll break it down easier if, I think that, there could be easier ways to break things down. Anyhow, once you've determined the massive amounts of styles that there are, maybe one of those styles stands out to you, but maybe it's not considered meta right now. Well, that's not to fret. What that means is you just have to put more effort into being good at this style. And that does suck, right? Like, you kind of sometimes want to take the easiest avenues. So if you're looking at becoming a jungler to be able to climb better, you might want to stick with the meta style. You might not have as much fun with it, but the meta style is generally what's going to be the easiest and best at this moment. And that's what a lot of the top elo junglers will do. You'll see that they'll change stylistically. The ones that don't generally will start struggling, having a hard time, because if they themselves don't understand how to play that style, it's really hard to play into that style and be successful. So it's always good to keep an eye on what the meta style is, even if you don't play it, just so you can kind of get a grasp or understanding for what it is. All junglers should be able to try to adapt to multiple styles of play, at least in my opinion, just so that you have a bit of a better understanding of how those people's win cons are and what you want to do. For instance, while I play some Shaco, I don't play a lot of Shaco, but I understand that most Shacos want to go for like a level 2, level 3 gank, because they need to be snowballing, and once they do one of those ganks, they're going to repeat either to the same lane if they didn't succeed on the first one, or they're going to go to another lane and keep going until they get a lead through potentially 2 to 3 ganks in. Meanwhile, most of my junglers want to clear their first camps before they start looking for a gank. So, knowing that's how Shaco plays, I generally would want to inform my team that I know this, because most players probably won't know that you don't want to gank and Shaco does. They just know that the jungler's gank, and when Shaco's ganking them, they're upset because you're not there. Sometimes it's best to let them know, hey, I don't gank super early, but this person does. Or vice versa. Maybe you want to be the early ganker, and they aren't, so you're telling people, I want to go in. That one's a bit easier to communicate. You can just ping that you're on the way. But still, having the knowledge of how Shaco plays versus how you play is very important to understand your own style and be able to express that to your team. Because if you don't tell your team what you're doing, more often than not, they're going to get mad at you. Which I think brings us to the very next slide here, which is kind of the jobs of the jungler here. You have to identify what job your jungler is most impactful at doing. Note, one of these jobs, all of them can do. All of them do all of these jobs, but certain ones are more specialized for individual jobs in this. So how to farm as your jungler? You have to identify what is your best pathing, and is there ways to adjust that pathing to benefit your teammates? So this is, again, where the knowledge of the jungler comes in, right? Like, you have to understand what your laners want to do as well. That is very, very hard. That is why jungle is so difficult. There's 150 some odd champions here, and you need to know how your champion reacts to most of the champions that will be played. You're occasionally going to get some oddball picks, but as long as you have a general understanding of how that champion functions, you can excel at this role. But if you want to know how to farm, you're going to have to look up pathing guides for your champions, because I can't give you here's a model for all champions on how you should path. Certain champions clear different camps better and more efficiently. The best way to look at it is if you are an AoE jungler, you generally like the multi-minion camps because you can clear them all with relative ease, and you don't take much damage from them. Because you're hitting all of them at once, you're gaining a lot more back than if you were hitting one minion at once. A long time ago, I made a guide that was around the old machete and talisman items, and I could break it down between those, and it was a lot easier. Well, now you have to just look at your kit and know that that's how you clear. For instance, I play a lot of Gragas. Gragas isn't bad at taking the individual camps like Gromp, Blue, and Red, but he is much better suited for taking out Krugs and Chickens. Though he takes a little bit of time to do both of those, he heals from doing these camps because he does almost all AoE damage except for his auto attacks. So, knowing this kind of thing, you need to know which camps are efficient for you to take and which ones are inefficient for you to take, especially with how the meta is shaping up. For those that don't know, at the time of this video, the meta is shaping up to be a lot more about early focused junglers, people who can gank more. So if you are playing people who are not gank oriented, then you have to find a way to make your pathing efficient so you can counter gank. That is something that's a little bit more of a complex idea, but it is something that's integral to the jungle. If you cannot gank as your jungler, because your jungler is just not set up to be ideal of, I'm the primary engage here. For instance, Kha'Zix is not necessarily a primary engage. You have to wait for one of a couple of things to happen. One, the enemy's laner overextends, in which it makes a wider berth that you can come in from, so they have a harder time escaping. Or two, your lane overextends and you wait for the enemy jungler to go in. So as your teammate's trying to escape and they're using their ability to catch them, you can jump in to attack them so that now they're scattering and you gain the momentum. Counter ganking is the idea of waiting for the enemy jungler to make a move and then attacking that move. And it can be successful. It is also kind of a skill that's kind of difficult because if you time it just a little bit wrong, you could be jumping into the enemy team when they have everything up and you die. Meanwhile, if you wait a little bit too long, they can get one of your laners and now you're in a misnumbered position. So there's an art to it and there's a skill to it that you just kind of have to learn as you are playing it. There's no real quick fix for me to tell you how to do that. And that also goes for ganking. You know, there's multiple gank paths, and depending on what champion you are, will determine what's the best and efficient gank path to you. But generally, when you're looking to gank, when you're looking on how do I gank, what you want to do is look for when they are overextending. And by overextending is if the enemy laner is past the midway point in the lane. So there's generally, if we could draw an imaginary line down the lanes, you can generally, with your mind, figure out where roughly the middle is. If they're pushed closer to your tower, then what you want to do is you want to move closer to their tower and come into the lane. And the reason why you want to do this is this gives them less time to react. Even though you are farther away, they don't have as much space to get away. Because usually, how do you get away? You run back to your tower. If they have to run into a river, and they don't have a lot of abilities to run away with, they really need assistance to get out of there, and you might be able to catch them and kill them. Or if not, you are pushing them out of the lane, you then help reset the lane, meaning that you start damaging the minions so your laner can kill them faster and easier, and then you allow them to back, which means you've pulled off a lot of pressure from them. You're not going to be taking damage to your tower as much, and even though you don't get a kill, you gain some XP for being in the lane with them while they kill the minions, so your time wasn't really that wasted. These are things you have to keep in mind for ganking. You don't always have to get a kill to be a successful gank. Getting the enemy to flash or lose a lot of farm or having to retreat on times that they don't want to can really reset the tempo for your team and help your teammates get better. Now note, if the laner's not very good, they might not understand what you're doing to help them, and that's unfortunate, but you have to be okay with that. We'll be getting into stuff like that later. As for just because I kind of didn't finish the topic of it, for your farming, generally, for when you are new, start to your bot side. Wherever your bot lane is, start there at the whatever buff camp there is there, and then full clear that side of the jungle. So if you want to go to the top side, go to the camp that's closer to bot side second, and then the one that's closer to top side. The reason is this just makes efficiency of your clear, right? Like you are efficiently going to clear. And over time, you'll learn which camps are easier for you to take, so you'll know a better pathing as you start developing skills in the role. But for a basic pathing, what you generally want to do is, if depending on what side of the map you are, you want to, so say you start on your red buff, because that's the one close to your bot side. You get a leash from your bot laners, and you don't think you're going to make a level 2 or level 3 gank to bot lane. You move down to your Krugs because that's the closest to them. So if somebody tries to do something about that time, you can react. But also what happens is you finish the Krugs and then you path up to your Raptors. And now that you're at your Raptors, you are closer to the mid lane and top lane, which are the lanes you were thinking you were going to gank to. So just keeping that in mind and understanding where you want to path to will allow you to be able to path to those lanes a little bit more efficiently and give you a lot more ease of access to them. So the third topic on the slide here, how is vision important? So vision is extremely important to a jungler around objectives and ganking. If the enemy team has a lot of vision of where you generally want to gank from, it's going to be very difficult to gank them. They can respond to you, they can, by backing up, they can choose to collapse on you because they know that your lane can't get there. And so even though you're setting up, maybe your lane hasn't set up properly yet and they can collapse and kill you. So vision is important to deny it from the enemy team, and the reason vision for yourself is good is it allows you to do that thing I told you about earlier, tracking the enemy jungler. You know, I might have just alluded to it a little bit, but tracking the enemy jungler is important because that allows you to be an early warning system to your team of, hey, he might be trying to gank here, run away. And the more you know, the easier it is to apply knowledge, right? Like, the less you have to guess, the easier the game gets. That's just how simple it is. If you don't have to guess where the enemy jungler is, and you know for a fact he's on bot side, top side can play a lot more aggressively if they think they can win the 1v1, because they don't have a fear that he's going to gank them, because he's way over there near bot, because you know he's there. If you have no idea where he is, all the lanes need to play a little bit safer, because you don't know where he is. So being able to identify where they are, that tracking idea is important, and vision is very good for setting that up. On top of that, vision is also really good for helping you secure objectives, because if you know where the enemy team is coming from, it's a lot easier to take a team fight around an objective because you know who's clustered together, who's not with them. You know, how many of them are there versus how many of us are here. Are they trying to come in? Hey, look, maybe their Lulu accidentally stepped in front of their front line trying to get vision down. Now she's a little bit isolated from everybody. You can jump in and kill her or force her to use her abilities on herself, which means she can't buff up their carry as much. And you just take these small trades that allow it easier to get these objectives. Likewise with the idea of vision and how important it is for setting up for things. Knowing how and when to do the objectives also plays a big crucial part in the vision game to a degree. Vision is important throughout the game, but certain parts of the game, getting better at being good at vision is going to be enhancing other elements of your game. For instance, taking objectives, having a lot of vision set up around the objective. So if you were going for dragon, you want most of your team's vision around the dragon pit, be it into the enemy jungle or in the pit and the river itself. You want to know almost everything you can about that area so that, again, you're not guessing what's going to happen. If all your vision's on Baron and you want to fight for this dragon and none of your team is set up around the dragon and none of your vision's set up around the dragon, you're taking stabs in the dark, and that's not a good thing. If the enemy team has a lot of vision there and you have none, they have a substantial advantage because they know where to attack you at your weak points and you don't know theirs. So how to do objectives and when to do objectives comes down to a lot of understanding the core fundamentals we've already kind of talked about, of understanding how to read the map, how to look for vision, how to control. You know, jungle is a large amount of control in the hands of the jungler and of course his team, but it is a role that allows you to gain information more so than anything else. It is an information gathering role. And vision is a big part of that, and that is what allows you to take objectives. So when should you look for an objective? Well, if you have numbers advantage, that's always a good time to start one up. If there's only 3 of them and 2 of their people are dead and all 5 of yours are around it, might as well start it up. How should you go about doing it? Well, if you have the numbers, run it down. You know, by run it down, I mean burn down the objective. Kill it as fast as you can, because They don't have that much ability to respond. Now, meanwhile, if it's a 50-50, there's 5 of you versus 5 of them, and you're roughly, in your, both you and the enemy jungler are about equally competent, then you might want to look for a team fight if that's something your team's good at. If not, maybe you should just call your team off of it and set up for a Dragon Steel or a Baron Steel if it's more important that you actually have to fight for it. Having to learn when it's important and when it's not is very hard to explain. But in most cases, for instance, the first 2 dragons of the game, well, yes, they are nice because they set you up to start stacking your dragons for a soul, aren't always the most integral ones. They don't make or break the game. The stats they give don't generally swing the game so much in a team's favor now that it's impossible to come back. So understanding that and looking for opportunities to take the Rift Herald, for instance, instead of the dragon, or taking camps away from the enemy jungler on their top side of the map, could potentially benefit you, the jungler, and your team a little bit more than trying to coin flip a team fight at the dragon. Say your team needs time to scale up. Say you have nothing but scaling laners. Victor, Vayne, top lane is Ornn. All of your laners need time to get bigger. You guys aren't at a point where fighting for those early dragons are going to be beneficial for you guys. Yeah, sure, if you win it, it will be beneficial, but your chances of winning it potentially aren't as good if they have a lot more early game champions. So start waiting them out. Play that kind of, be patient. Patience is a big part of the jungle. I mean, it's a big part of information gathering, and it's a big part of knowing what to do. So you got to kind of learn these things over time, and you'll start being able to gauge what type of champion you are, what type of champions are around you. And that's the biggest thing about the jungle is there's no quick, this is how you get into the jungle. It takes time. I mean, it is a lot of knowledge, and I could bestow all the knowledge I have out there, but if you don't understand the knowledge because you haven't gotten to see it in action, well, it doesn't matter that I gave you all the tools. You have to kind of learn them for yourself. And that's unfortunately a big part of this video is that, while I can give you these kind of small things that might help you, the big things come with time. So the next thing is going to be about pathing. So how to path. Like I said, for actual direct how does my champion path go in correlation to other people's champions, that's going to differ. Your champion pathing is going to differ from champion to champion. General pathing is crucial for a jungle, but like the slide says here, it's crucial, but it is not uniform. Each jungler has a different path that they want to take. For instance, Lee Sin might do red to blue to Gromp and look for a level 3 gank, or red to blue, look for a level 2 gank. Meanwhile, somebody like Gragas wants to do red Krugs chickens, or raptors, sorry, and look for a level 3 gank, or potentially just skip that and go over to Wolves Blue, Gromp, and Wolves Blue, Crab, Gromp. Your pathing's going to change relative to how your jungle champion and your style work. So that's why it's so important to kind of identify what style of champion you want to play and what that champion wants to do. And then I would recommend looking up specific guides about those champions in relation to the jungle role. And then one crucial thing to know about pathing is once you have learned a path, all it does is take time to learn it. It doesn't change much. Your path can be used almost exactly the same almost every game. Now, as you get into higher levels of play, mind you, like Diamond and higher, you might need to be able to adjust your path more to be able to respond to how your laners play and how the enemy jungler's playing a little bit more. But at least from Iron to Plat, you really kind of just need to know your pathing. And by that meaning, you need to have a path for your champion set out and kind of execute on that. Maybe you have a fallback plan in case maybe there's an early invade that kind of screws up your pathing a little bit. There's a couple of things you can do to adjust it, but early on when you were just learning how to play it, the most important thing is memorizing the pathing and then figuring out why is that pathing good, and then that allows you to adapt and overcome these issues that might present themselves later. And as you improve, naturally you'll be able to start adjusting them a bit better and fine-tuning it a bit more to either your own style or how the game's evolving or how your laners need assistance in different ways. But like I said, a lot of jungle comes from time, and pathing is no different. I can tell you that that on the screen here, starting red, going Krugs, going chicken, going wolves, going blue, going gromp, or going crab, going gromp. That's the general pathing I go most games. But that might change relative to how I need to adapt to the game. You know, I might skip my grump and go for a gank mid or top. I might skip my blue and just go to the crab because I fell behind over here because there was some type of skirmish I had to take here early to save my mid laner. You have to learn to adapt and overcome certain challenges to allow yourself to be more efficient at jungling. But that being said, learning the basic paths are going to be crucial, and I recommend looking up a pathing guide on how to do that. This is just kind of to get you in the mindset that, okay, this is another thing I have to learn and be ready for. And then lastly, guys, you need to build a mental fortress, because this is the most taxing role. A lot of people will argue, well, ADC is the hardest because it relies on my support, or my support's the hardest because it relies on my ADC, or mid's the hardest because I can't do anything without a good jungler, or top's the hardest because I'm always left here by myself, but the enemy jungler is always here. Do you kind of get an idea of what all that means? All that means is that people really don't like the jungle role. They don't understand it to a full degree. They don't have a full fundamental knowledge of what the role is. They have a basic gist of what they think the jungler should be doing, which for most people is gank, 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 gank. But, you know, I just told you that there's a lot of things you have to know to become a jungler. There's a lot of things you need to do to be a basic jungler. And this isn't even like, and mind you, this whole video is not about like, oh, this is how you become a great jungler. This is how you become a jungler. This is baseline jungle stuff. This isn't like, oh yeah, this is all the stuff I need to be to super succeed. Now, counter ganking and adjusting your path and figuring out counter matchups and understanding, there's some other concepts that I didn't fully dive into that, yes, you're going to have to learn at some point to become a better jungler. But just the simple basics is understanding that there's a lot of knowledge in this role you have to become familiar with. That's taxing. That is a lot more taxing than just being mechanically good at someone. And, you know, being able to press buttons and kill somebody in a proper combo isn't that taxing, because once you memorize that, that's super easy. You always have to think of what you're doing and analyze the situation in jungle, because every game is different. That means you have to be aware of how it's different every game. On top of that, you have to understand people are going to hate you no matter what you do. You could be ganking top and getting them like super fed and getting you really ahead on the top side of the map, but then your bot lane's losing and they're going to blame you and they're going to tilt and they're going to be mad at you because you didn't get them ahead, even though they are the ones that caused it and maybe the enemy jungler ganked them. But, you know, guess what? A good enough lane can nullify a jungler by warding and playing passively by knowing that you were not there. You can continue to tell them, I'm not playing to your side of the map, please play safe, but that's not going to help as much as you'd hope. So you are going to be hated. That's okay. You're going to have to know that. What's not okay is if you are playing intentionally bad and they hate you, then you deserve to be hated, and I hate you for putting a bad name on junglers. But if you were just having a rough game, understand that that happens. That's okay. It's probably best to mute everybody and kind of move past it. And guys, just a thing is continue to learn and persevere. You know, don't let these things that are going to be negatives from other people and negatives from the role hold you back. Let yourself become intoxicated with jungle like I have and keep learning and keep progressing. And I hope this video has been somewhat helpful for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it enough to leave a comment or a like and maybe subscribe to me. Or maybe you go look at my Twitch that I leave down below. And as always, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. See you later.